The president-elect's Treasury under Janet Yellen may bring Fed Chair Jerome Powell exactly what he hoped for: more economic stimulus from the executive branch. Bloomberg's markets reporter Kriti Gupta is here to explain. Kriti, good to see you this morning. What do we know about Yellen's relationship with Powell? I mean, she's done what Powell is doing.
Well, they're very much in sync about simply what this economy needs for that recovery, whether it comes to fiscal stimulus coming from, of course, Washington, or whether it comes from the rates picture, more of the kind of financial aspects of it that you're seeing from the Federal Reserve.
Okay, so let's go into the rates picture for people who haven't been following this as closely as you have for the past few years. What has the rates picture been under Fed Chair Powell, and what was it like under Fed Chair Yellen?
Absolutely. So, of course, we do know, going back to the last financial crisis, we do know that Chairman Yellen at the time was in charge of really getting that recovery underway. And, of course, you're seeing similar parallels here under Chairman Powell as well. We just had this major recession. We're trying to kind of get find our footing, really, for another recovery. And we're seeing a similar parallel in terms of what they needed in both recessions, and that's fiscal stimulus. And we're talking about the rates picture. That simply means they've lowered rates. So they lowered it in the last financial crisis. They've lowered it again to zero during this financial crisis. And once again, just for our audience, lowering rates really just means being able to have companies and banks borrow at lower cost. So it just kind of makes some of that economic churn just a little bit cheaper. And from that picture, that's why the rates piece is so important.
Okay, so it's not lost on us, though, that that Congress essentially has been sitting on a $2.2 trillion stimulus package. We haven't seen any action there from Congress in quite a while, despite the fact that the American people, I think it's fair to say, really do need this. What does that mean for Yellen going into Treasury Secretary?
Well, one of the things that Chairman Yellen at the time when she was in the Federal Reserve really talked about was that she's kind of limited when you're in the Federal Reserve. You can see kind of the disparities in income inequality, or the parts of the economy, the groups, the races that have really been underserved by stimulus measures by the Fed. And the Fed can't do much about that. They have lending capacity, but eventually that money gets paid back. Really what they need, and Chairman Powell has said this as well, really what they need is to be able to get money into the hands of the groups that are most affected. And especially now when you have the pandemic hitting different races that aren't typically affected to this extent. So that's where Chairman Yellen, in a Treasury Secretary role, can really help change the picture.
But there's also the political picture here, which I think is going to be very challenging for the Biden administration, especially if Republicans do end up holding on to the Senate. Of course, that depends on the runoff elections in Georgia in January. What is the political needle that she has to thread to get everybody on board with a large fiscal stimulus?
Well, this is one of her shortcomings, actually. This is one of the risks that come into play here. This idea that her predecessor, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, has been a key fiscal negotiator. So he's really been trying to broker this deal between all the parties involved. So Janet Yellen really has to come in and pick up the pieces here. Now, she is widely respected by both sides, but she doesn't have that political experience you need on Congress to really lobby these lawmakers. And that's really where she faces a key test.
What about when it comes to economic inequality? This is something that's been talked about in the Biden campaign and with progressives and Democrats alike for years at this point. She has a big challenge ahead of her with the potential for another recession because of the pandemic, but at the same time, inequality being exacerbated over the last few years. How does she tackle it?
Well, it definitely comes in those fiscal negotiations. So once again, rerouting some of those funds to the groups that have been underserved, and whether that's small businesses, whether those are people who can't necessarily go to a bank and ask for a big loan or even pay the loan. It's changing the conversation from the Fed being able to lend to Congress and those funds being able to simply give them grants. So that picture change is very important, and that's why having that alliance with Chairman Powell is also doubly important.
So she hasn't officially been picked yet. This is all from press reports, including
Right.
Bloomberg's press report. How has she been received?
Pretty well, actually, by Wall Street. Now, she has, of course, this...
But she doesn't come from Wall Street, too, we should note, which is a
Right.
departure for the traditional Treasury Secretary.
It is. And she, of course, she's an economist, right? So she has had all this experience in the Federal Reserve, but she has navigated this crisis before. And so that really helps her, and with none other than Biden in the White House as vice president. So this really does give her a little bit of help, a little bit of credentials, if you will, to really tackle this crisis.
Bloomberg's market reporter Kriti Gupta, thanks for your time. Have a good Thanksgiving if we don't see you between now and then.
The biggest stories the moment they happen from around the globe. Subscribe to Bloomberg Quick Take now for insight in an instant.